Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have the second episode of the most beautiful banknotes. In this case, another one that I don't have, but I have my eye on it. We're going to talk about Portuguese India 1 rupee of 1924. But you can never talk about Portuguese India before talking about Portuguese Empire. And don't get me wrong, and here a bit of the disclaimer. Although I'm going to give you a lot of information about, well, my country of origin, Portugal, and the colonial past, is not that I'm proud of the colonial past in that sense. Um, this is just telling as it was back then. No, I'm very critical about the colonial past of Portugal, especially in the 20th century, but that shouldn't be something to be debated in this video. But basically, as you probably know, Portugal started their discoveries or the conquest of new lands in the late 14th century with some possessions in what is now Morocco. Um, then the discoveries went normally by sea, right? The navigators. First thing that they discovered that it was acquired by Portugal were islands that didn't have inhabitants, the Azores and Madeira, which are still part of Portugal. And then, of course, it went down to the African coast. As you see here, this line, it's basically exactly the line of the discoveries. So, Portugal, Bartolomeu Dias managed to pass the Cape of Good Hope, nowadays South Africa, back in 1488. And in 1498, Vasco da Gama reached India by sea, the first person to do a trip or a navigation from Europe to India by sea. Um, as you probably know, also in 1494, Portugal and Spain signed a treaty, a Tordesillas Treaty, that divided the world in half between both countries. That's why you see here Brazil. This line is exactly the line that separated Spain to the left and Portugal to the right here. Yeah? That said, Portugal reached Brazil theoretically for the first time, although it was clear back then that it the Portuguese knew that there was land in this area of Brazil, probably from the many trips in this part of the Atlantic Ocean there. But officially, it was Nuno Alves Cabral in 1500. What happened afterwards was that in Portugal, at the beginning, had a lot of colonies. They were mostly like ports, not really colonies. It was small possessions. A lot of it India, a lot also China, some parts of like Macau, some parts of what is now Indonesia, Timor, of course, and Madagascar, a lot of the African coast. What happened was that Portugal was annexed by Spain in 1580, and after that, the Spanish were at war, especially with the Dutch, and that's when the first decline of the Portuguese Empire started. So in the late 16th century, um, and back in beginning of the 19th century, all that was left was this map here. So some possessions of Brazil, which was later lost or that gained their independence in 1822, and then some African possessions. These are São Tomé and Príncipe, Portuguese Guinea or Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, Angola, Mozambique, and Timor, Macau, and Portuguese India. Um, Part of Portugal lost Brazil, as I mentioned, and this pink map, as they call it, was never realized. So the British got the area here in the middle between Angola and Mozambique, which led to, not going to go into a lot of detail, but led to a certain resentment towards the British that were our allies and still are. But Portugal, being a dictatorship, wanted to show or at least during a period of the dictatorship that lasted from 1926 to 74, Portugal, having lost some of the importance or most of the importance that it had in the past, wanted to show still, at least inside of people, right, inside of the country, that we were still a big nation. So this map was in every school back then. So saying Portugal is not a small country, meaning that if you count all the overseas territories of Africa, mostly, Portugal was the biggest country of Europe. Part of it was, of course, the states of India, and Portuguese India was basically a big amount of small ports or smaller ports, and some small possessions. So all of these that you see here were at a certain point of time, mostly in the 15th or the 16th and 17th century, part of Portugal. And as you can see, this goes from what is now Bangladesh to this part of India, including the Maldives, and including, for example, Calcutta or Mumbai, which was then given by the Kingdom of Portugal to the Kingdom of England as a gift for marriage. After the Second World War, or not after the Second World War, but by the time of that these banknotes were issued, the ones that I'm talking about, and until 1961, what was left of Portuguese India was basically Goa, that you see here, which was the biggest territory, and then Damão and Dio, as you can see here. This was also lost by Portugal in 1961 when India invaded, well, not invaded, but re-annexed their territory at the time. The order from Portugal was to fight back, but basically Portugal had a very small army there against a more prepared and with more firepower army from the Indian Union. Also, it's unclear, but what is sad is that, or I'm not going to go here into much detail, but of course this is a natural part of India, not Portugal. And at the time there was not even a shot fired. It was just given. The territories were just passed to India, although everyone that returned to Portugal back then, or especially the commander in India, was put in jail because Salazar, the dictator back then, thought that the only good soldiers were the ones that were victorious or dead. So until 1974, the Portuguese Revolution, the Coronation Revolution, Portugal officially still considered these territories as an integral part of the Portuguese ultramar, which is overseas possessions. Although in reality, since '61, there was no Portuguese didn't rule anything in India anymore. In 1974, of course, with the revolution, with the independence of all the colonies, also Portugal sat down in India at the time and restored diplomatic relationships, including the acknowledgement that this was part of India. It's not in that context yet. We're talking about the series or the banknote that we're talking about today is actually from 1924, so not so far away as 1961. The series, it's constituted of actually 8 banknotes. It goes from the 1 rupee, the one that we're talking about, and it goes all the way to 2.5 rupees, 5 rupees, 10 rupees, 20, 50, 100, and 500. The 1 rupee was divided into 16 tanga. Tangas existed, some banknotes of tangas in the past, but most of it was just coins in the 20s. The issues, it's the 3rd issue by the BNU, which was it's the Overseas National Bank. It was a Portuguese bank that issued banknotes for the colonies, almost all of them. Angola being one exception, especially in the after, I don't remember exactly the date. Um, what is here interesting is that one rupee was actually the same, one Portuguese rupee or Portuguese Indian rupee was the same as an Indian rupee, so it was 1 to 1. The motives here are animals, as you can see, and this building here, which I didn't research. And you see here the phrase or uh, the tag here, Nova Goa, which is New Goa. Yeah? These banknotes are all very, very hard to, inexpensive to find. Most of them you can even only find in Specimen. But we're not going to talk about this particular ones. We're going to talk about the 1 rupee from 1924. This is P23. And first in the front, I want to talk about two interesting things. The first one is the choice of the center. Uh, I think it's the only banknote of Portugal or the Portuguese colonies that actually has an animal in the front uh, with so much emphasis. Normally, the motifs used was like something from the discoveries or um, figures that were relevant for the colony. But this case, you do have a tiger, a Bengal tiger. Um, the second thing that is interesting is this seal here that you see here on the right side. It's a bit different, but basically this seal is still used today in Portugal as a white seal for documentations like notary things. Another interesting thing is, as you can see, this ship here, and people that collect Portuguese colony banknotes will know that there's various seals in different banknotes that has exactly this ship, which with the words here below, colonies, commerce, and agriculture. Yeah. Unfortunately, this banknote is hard to find in a better shape than this, so that's why you only have that picture. The back is even more interesting in my opinion because it depicts a temple called Jorgamat temple. Sorry if I'm not um, saying this in a proper way. Um, the interesting thing about this temple is that this is actually very far away from the Portuguese colonies at the time. It was actually in the other side of India, and uh, in the side in the east side of India. Um, and what I could, and although this needs further research, what I could get from a paper written in the 80s was that Portugal had a big trading center back in the 16th, 17th century in Orissa, and this temple was used as almost like a landmark for navigators, and that's why it was important at the time. So, but this definitely needs more research. Some peculiarities about this banknote is, of course, the first one is that it's in various languages besides Portuguese, which was officially the language, although I would believe very few people spoke it. You had text in Urdu, in Hindi, in Gujarati and Kannada, as you can see here. The banknote, although from India, had the date, it's the 1st of January of 1924, but dated from Lisbon. So here something actually very interesting. The notes were printed by De La Rue. Here it says copiers in London in Portuguese, and they even used Thomas De La Rue did even use for some propaganda test banknotes the same image of the tiger of Bengal, as you can see here. These are the same banknotes, the face and the back. It's a test or publicity banknote issued by Thomas De La Rue. In terms of the prices of the banknotes, and I'll go back to the specimen and the 23A afterwards in the next portion of this presentation. But I would pass the World Paper Money standard catalog aside, saying that the 23, the one that we're looking into, the PIC 23, um, well, you're expected to pay around 900 bucks for it, and extremely fine. Although this is a hard banknote to find. There's not so many examples that were sold recently, and the prices will be around that. For a specimen, you're theoretically paying around the 3,000 US dollars, and then the 23A, which you'll see in a bit, which pops up a bit more often. If you want the almost uncirculated note, you're paying around the $4,000. So this is an expensive banknote. So the specimen is not very different than the banknote. You just have the word specimen written diagonally. The back is exactly the same. Here, I think very interesting is the PIC 23A. So, as I mentioned to you, the first banknotes of the PIC 23 was issued in 1924, but in 1926 there was started the Second Republic in Portugal, the Estado Novo, which was the dictatorship, and some laws changed. So basically, the number 23A is that change of the law, and it's written here in red. It's called Decreto number 1754. And this is exactly why. So this banknote was issued in this overprint is issued in 1929. Not all the banknotes existed with this overprint, and this is a bit easier to find. Good, and that was it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, the video, and if you have any questions, just let me know.